It's no secret the modern-day NFL is a passing league. From top to bottom, it's littered with arm talent. Today's quarterbacks are able to sling the ball all over the field from different arm angles with a pass rusher in their face. None of it seems to matter to the modern gunslingers, many of whom have complete autonomy to call plays at the line of scrimmage and take chances where they see fit. But it wasn't always such a passing-dominant league. It took a long succession of coaches and quarterbacks pushing the boundaries of the status quo, and in fairness, some help from a few rule changes along the way in order to create the pass-crazed league we know today. Before Patrick Mahomes was throwing for 5,000 yards and 50 touchdowns as a first-time starter, there was Peyton Manning who was dissecting defenses with a precision that had never been seen. There have been a number of pioneers, both coaches and players along the way, who have received much of the credit for the NFL's transformation. But if you go way back through the annals of NFL history, you will find that there were a handful of men who are rarely mentioned but were pivotal in building the foundation for the high-flying offenses that light up the fields on Sunday. I mean, for starters, the forward pass wasn't always a legal play. The first legal forward pass in collegiate football wasn't even completed until 1906, over 60 years after the first formal intercollegiate football game was played, when St. Louis quarterback Bradbury Robinson completed a 20-yard strike to Jack Schneider in a scoreless tie against Carroll College. It was seen as a gimmick, and it would be a full month before the next pass was completed. Coaches were simply not yet buying into the concept. Anyways, how is it possible that the forward pass, a play that wasn't even included in the original rules, became such an integral part of today's game? Interestingly enough, it was a reaction to the early 1900s version of the most prevalent storyline that surrounds the NFL today: player safety concerns and the impending doom that football is facing as a result of it. And while many of today's fans may think that this is the first time their beloved game has come under attack, that could not be further from the truth. Instead, it is just another instance of history repeating itself. Just like the modern NFL has had to respond to the public outcry for player safety reform right around the turn of the 20th century, there was a very similar media onslaught that had football in its crosshairs. Football's detractors were very outspoken, claiming that while the game was entertaining, perhaps it was not worth the health risks. These fears were exacerbated when the Chicago Tribune reported that there were at least 18 fatalities and 159 serious injuries reported around the country as a result of football in 1905. Keep in mind, this was at a time when football was a roaring attraction, collegiate games in particular. The premier programs were drawing tens of thousands of fans to their games, while most Major League Baseball games only drew 3,000 some odd spectators. So, the fact that people were calling for the sport to be banished from college campuses was a shocking turn of events. The issues were so much on the forefront of the American conscience that the sitting president at the time, Teddy Roosevelt, decided to speak out. Roosevelt explained brutality in playing a game should awaken the heartiest and most plainly shown contempt for the player guilty of it. The president didn't want the game to just go away. He had long been a football fan, and he believed it to be part of the American culture. But the outrage had escalated to a point that something had to be done. The injuries and fatalities were continuing to pile up, and if nothing changed, the game would very much be in jeopardy. Roosevelt decided to call a meeting with 62 representatives from different schools to discuss how they could change the rules of the game to make it safer. The Brain Trust came up with a number of different changes. Earning a first down now required 10 yards instead of 5. They banned a few formations that were deemed too dangerous, namely the flying wedge, and it also resulted in the creation of the neutral zone between the offense and the defense. But this wasn't enough. They needed a way to space out the field. At that time, football looked much more like rugby than the game we watch today. It was two sides of players ramming into one another on the line of scrimmage, and a ball carrier trying to carefully navigate whatever space he could find. The panel hoped that spacing out the field would in turn lower the amount of brutal collisions that the players endured, and the result would end up being the biggest, most revolutionary change of all. They decided to make the forward pass legal, a decision that was made much to the chagrin of that generation's football guys who believed it to be a travesty. They believed that football was a man's game and that the same violence that was resulting in the widespread concern was what made it great. Kent Stevens, a historian with the College Football Hall of Fame, explained the widespread reluctance to accept the forward pass to the Smithsonian like this. Because of these rules and the fact coaches at the time thought the forward pass was a sissified type of play that wasn't really football, they were hesitant to adopt this new strategy. The new rule wasn't, however, met exclusively with disdain. Some of the more progressive minds around the game were excited by the change. John Heisman, who coached at a number of schools including Auburn, Clemson, and Georgia Tech, in addition to being the namesake of college football's most famous trophy, was a huge proponent of the forward pass. He had been lobbying for it to become part of the game for years. His vision for the future of football first came to him while he was scouting a game between North Carolina and Georgia in 1895. On a botched snap, the punter heaved the ball downfield to a teammate who caught it and ran the length of the field for a touchdown. Despite the controversy that arose from the referee inadvertently allowing an illegal play, Heisman believed that it could be a crucial facet of the game if properly integrated. Still, at first, it didn't seem like the rule change would cause such a seismic shift in the way the game was played. Far too many of the established coaches from elite collegiate programs scoffed at the new rule, hoping for it to explode from the jump. It wasn't just their apprehension with the changes of the culture of the game that made them hesitant to accept the forward pass. It was also because the play was that much riskier back then. Unlike today's game where a passer's primary concern is just not throwing an interception, back then passes couldn't be thrown from outside the tackles, and any incomplete pass resulted in a 15-yard penalty. And worst of all, if a pass dropped to the ground without being touched, possession automatically went to the defensive team. This resulted in many coaches standing their ground and implementing traditional offenses which almost exclusively featured running plays.
I don't like change!
The forward pass was, however, starting to make waves in the lower levels of football. Today's quarterbacks owe a huge thank you to these revolutionary coaches who had a propensity to think outside the box, like Glenn Scobie Warner, who was better known as Pop. Yeah, the Pop Warner. The same one that nearly every local youth football association is named after. He was a driving force behind the development of the forward pass in football. At the time, Warner was coaching the Pennsylvania Carlisle Indian Industrial School, a federally funded off-reservation boarding school for Native Americans. Warner had coached the team in the late 1800s, and after building a strong reputation as a coach and leader of young men in the college ranks, he was brought back in to head the Carlisle program and the school's athletic department. Pop had to lean on a variety of creative strategies, including a number of deceptive trick plays, many of which he invented to help compensate for the diminutive stature that many of his players had. He developed and popularized concepts like end-arounds, reverses, and flea flickers, all of which are featured in many of today's offenses. Always wanting to push the boundaries of the rules, Warner even developed one play for kickoffs that had the players huddle up after receiving the kick, and one player would hide the ball under the jersey before everyone split off into different directions, often leaving the kicking team unsure of who to tackle. The point being, it wasn't a huge surprise that Warner was eager to capitalize on the new forward pass rule. Warner developed a whole new offense, one that he proudly called the Carlisle formation. It was the first offense to feature a wing, which is most similar to the modern-day version of the wide receiver. He made several other significant contributions to offensive football too, concepts like the body block technique and wingback formations. Because the forward pass was so new, when other teams did use it, they were throwing it more like a rugby or basketball pass. That was until Warner's offense was the first to feature a full-time spiral passer. Carlisle was a force to be reckoned with under Warner's leadership, and despite being severely undersized compared to its competition, the team won 10 or more games in a season 5 times between 1907 and 1914. And while nearly every football fan today knows the name Pop Warner, very few realize the insane impact he had on the development of the game. In the time since Warner and his players at Carlisle took the football world by storm, obviously a lot has changed, including the number of rules surrounding the forward pass, which admittedly has aided in its growth. In 1933, a little more than 25 years after the first forward pass was recorded in a professional game, pro football really started to embrace the pass by introducing the first series of alterations to the forward pass rule. It was then that it legalized the forward pass from anywhere behind the line of scrimmage, so the passer didn't have to drop back at least 5 yards anymore. They revised the incompletion penalty to a variation that is known today as the intentional grounding penalty. It wasn't just the changes to the rule that signaled change was coming in football, but they also continued to make tweaks to the ball itself. Originally, it was more of a rounded egg-shaped ball, bearing a closer resemblance to a rugby ball, but as the emphasis shifted towards the forward pass, the powers that be had manufacturers narrow the ends of the ball, which allowed for more accuracy and distance when throwing it. As a result, it wasn't long before passing started playing a much bigger role in football, and in turn, the passing statistics began to rise. Just 3 years later, in 1936, The NFL had its first 1,000-yard passer in Green Bay's Arnie Herbert, and then in 1942, its first 2,000-yard passer, another Packers QB, Cecil Isabel. And ever since, the numbers have continued to grow, with guys like Johnny Unitas breaking the 3,000 passing yards threshold in 1960, just like Joe Namath did to the 4,000-yard threshold in 1967, and Dan Marino to the 5,000-yard threshold in 1984. So while it may seem like the uptick in passing that we've seen in today's game came out of nowhere, that couldn't be further from the truth. It's been a gradual progression that dates back before the NFL even existed, when men like Pop Warner and John Heisman recognized the value of the pass and started a revolution that continues today. If you're new here and you haven't subscribed yet, now's a great time to do that by clicking the subscribe button down below. If you like the video, then like the video. We'd really appreciate it. And last but not least, don't forget to tune into TPS every single day for more cool videos. We'll see you next time.